Each morning before sunrise, he left the park while the streets were still gray and empty. He folded his thin blanket, slid it into a torn backpack, and walked toward the river. The water smelled cold and honest. It reminded him that time moved, forward whether he wanted it to or not. By 8 o'clock, he was clean enough to pass as normal. He washed his face in public bathrooms, fixed his hair with wet hands, and changed his shirt behind a closed door. The mirror always showed him the same thing: a young man with tired eyes and a careful smile. Someone who looked fine, someone who wasn't. The bookstore opened at 9. It was small, warm, and smelled like old paper and coffee. Caleb liked that smell. It felt safe. Books didn't judge him. Stories didn't ask questions. He worked the front desk, rang up customers, and helped children find fairy tales. Old couples liked him. They said he reminded them of their grandson. Caleb always smiled at that and felt a quiet ache in his chest. No. One there knew he slept outside. He made sure of it. At lunch, he ate cheap sandwiches and read whatever book was closest. Romance novels were his secret favorite. He liked stories where love arrived gently, where people saw each other fully and stayed. He wondered what that felt like. He had never stayed anywhere long enough to find out. Sometimes when the shop was quiet, his thoughts drifted to his grandfather, Arthur Rowan. The name alone carried weight. Arthur was known across the city as a man who built towers from nothing. He wore tailored suits, spoke with confidence, and expected the same strength from everyone around him. After Caleb's parents died in a car accident, Arthur tried to take control of his life. He offered expensive schools, strict schedules, a future that felt planned down to the minute. Caleb ran from that world as soon as he could. They hadn't spoken in years. Arthur thought Caleb was traveling or studying or figuring himself out somewhere far away. Caleb never corrected him. Pride kept his mouth shut. Fear kept his phone turned off. By evening, the city grew loud. The bookstore lights dimmed. Caleb locked the door and waved goodbye to his coworkers. They all went home. He walked in the opposite direction. The park waited. It wasn't the worst place to sleep. Trees blocked the wind. A broken street lamp kept most people away. Still, nights were hard. Sounds echoed too close. Hunger spoke too loudly. Memories crept in when he tried to rest. That night was colder than usual. Caleb sat on the bench, pulling his coat tight, when a familiar voice broke the quiet. "You're going to freeze one day, you know?" He looked up and smiled before he could stop himself. Lena stood a few steps away, holding 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. Her cheeks were red from the cold. She always looked like she had rushed out the door to save someone from something. "You're dramatic," Caleb said. "I'm still alive, for now," she replied, handing him a cup. Lena worked at the cafe near the bookstore. She had noticed Caleb months ago. First his kindness, then his long hours. Then the way he never talked about home. She didn't ask many questions. She just stayed. Caleb didn't know why she cared. He was grateful she did. They sat side by side, steam rising between them. The coffee burned his hands in a good way. The sandwich tasted like comfort. For a moment, the park didn't feel so empty. "You could come crash at my place," Lena said, not for the first time. "Just until you figure things out." Caleb shook his head. "I'm okay." She studied him, eyes soft but sharp. "You don't have to be okay all alone." He looked away. Words pressed against his throat, heavy and dangerous. If he spoke, everything might spill out. He couldn't risk that, so he smiled instead. Lena sighed but didn't push. She never did. They talked about books, about strange customers, about nothing at all. Caleb laughed quietly, surprised by how easy it felt. He forgot the cold. He forgot the night. That was when Lena lifted her phone. "Hold still," she said. "For what?" Caleb asked. "Just a picture." He raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because you look human," she said simply. He laughed, a real laugh, unguarded. Steam curled around his face. The city lights blurred behind him. For 1 second, He forgot to hide. The camera clicked. Neither of them thought. Lena posted the photo later that night with a short caption about kindness and quiet. Strength. She had a small following. Friends, coworkers, people who liked hopeful things. She didn't tag Caleb. She didn't name him. She went to sleep feeling warm miles away. In a glass tower overlooking the city, Arthur Rowan sat alone in his office. It was past midnight. The building was silent except for the hum of machines. He should have gone home hours ago. But sleep had been hard lately. Age crept in when he least expected it. He opened his tablet, scrolled without focus. News, business updates, social posts. He paused when an image caught his eye. A young man sat on a park bench, holding a cup of coffee. His smile was tired but gentle. His eyes carried something familiar. Something that made Arthur's chest tighten. Arthur leaned closer. The nose, the jaw, the way his hair fell forward. No, his fingers trembled as he zoomed in. The world seemed to tilt. Caleb, he whispered. His grandson's face stared back at him, thinner than before, older in a way that had nothing to do with time. The background was dark. The bench was cracked. The coat was too light for winter. Arthur's breath came sharp and fast. He read the caption again, and again. No mention of names, no explanation. But Arthur didn't need one. He knew that bench. He had passed it 100 times without looking. His assistant's voice echoed in his head, reminding him of unanswered calls, of letters returned unopened, of years spent waiting for a young man who never came home. Arthur stood so quickly his chair rolled back. He felt something crack open inside him. Fear, guilt, regret, all at once. He grabbed his coat and keys, ignoring the hour, ignoring reason. He needed to know. He needed to see Dot outside. The city lights blurred as his driver took sharp turns. Arthur stared out the window, heart pounding. Every memory felt sharper now. Every mistake louder. When the car slowed near the park, Arthur told the driver to stop. He stepped out into the cold night. The bench was empty. Arthur stood there, alone under the broken street lamp, staring at the place where his grandson had been laughing just hours earlier. For the Arthur Rowan did not sleep that night. He sat in the back of the car long after the driver offered to take him home. The park bench stayed in his mind like a wound. The empty space felt louder than any answer. Arthur realized something simple and painful. He had been rich enough to buy silence but not love, and silence had cost him years. By morning, Arthur had made a plan, not a business plan, a human one. He asked his assistant for one thing only: the address of the bookstore near the river. No explanations. No questions. Caleb woke before dawn. As usual. His body ached from the cold. He folded his blanket and tucked it away. Something felt off, like the air had shifted overnight. He couldn't name it, so he ignored it and walked toward the river. Dot at the bookstore. The bell above the door rang as he stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around him. He breathed easier. He liked being early. Quiet helped him feel steady. He was stacking books when he felt it again. That strange pressure. Like being watched at 10 sharp. The door opened. Caleb looked up and froze. Arthur. Rowan stood just inside the doorway, holding his coat, eyes fixed on him. No guards, no assistants. Just the man who raised him from a distance and then let him go. The room seemed to shrink. Customers browsed quietly, unaware that a lifetime had just collided between two shelves of paperbacks. Arthur took one slow step forward. His voice came out rough. Caleb. Caleb's hands shook. He placed the book down carefully, as if sudden movement might break something fragile. His heart pounded so hard he felt dizzy. You shouldn't be here, Caleb said. Arthur nodded. You're right, but I am. They stood facing each other, words stacked high between them. Years of silence pressed down. Arthur saw it all now. The thin jacket, the tired face. The way Caleb stood like he was ready to run. I saw the picture, Arthur said softly. Caleb's stomach dropped. What picture? The one in the park. Caleb looked away. Heat rushed to his face, sharp and humiliating. That wasn't meant for you. I know, Arthur said, but it reached me. The bell rang again. A customer asked for help finding a cookbook. Caleb moved on instinct, guiding the woman with steady hands. Arthur watched, stunned by the normalcy. His grandson worked, smiled, lived, and slept nowhere safe. When the customer left, Arthur spoke again. Where do you stay? Caleb laughed. Once, bitter. You already know. Arthur swallowed. Why didn't you tell me? Caleb turned then, eyes bright with anger. Because you don't listen. You plan. You control. You decide what's best without asking. Arthur flinched. The words landed clean and true. I wanted you safe, Arthur said. I wanted to choose. Caleb replied. Silence fell again, thick but not empty. It carried truth now. I'm not here to take over, Arthur said. I'm here to ask. Caleb hesitated. No one asked him anything anymore. Ask what? He said. Arthur took a breath. What do you need? The question cracked something open. Caleb felt it spread through his chest, slow and dangerous. He wanted to say nothing. He wanted to say everything. I need space, Caleb said at last. I need time. I need you to stop trying to fix me. Arthur nodded. Then let me do one thing only. Caleb waited. Let me make sure you're warm, Arthur said. No strings. Caleb studied him. The man looked smaller than he remembered. Older, scared. That scared him more than anger ever could. There's a room, Arthur continued. Near here, it's empty. No staff, no rules. Stay if you want. Leave if you want. Caleb's throat tightened. He hated how much he wanted to say yes. I'll think about it, he said. Arthur accepted that. He always had trouble accepting. No, but today he didn't fight it. He reached into his pocket and placed a simple key on the counter, in case. He said dot. Then he turned and walked out. Caleb stared at the key for a long time. That evening, Lena noticed something was wrong. The moment she saw him, he moved like someone carrying a storm inside. You okay? She asked, handing him coffee. My grandfather found me, Caleb said. Her eyes widened. The rich one, the only one. They sat on the bench again, but the night felt different. Closer, louder. What did he do? Lena asked. He didn't yell. Caleb said, he didn't give me money. He just looked at me like he was sorry. Ah, big, she said. I don't know what to do, Caleb admitted. Lena reached out, then stopped herself. You don't have to decide tonight. He nodded. He liked that she never pushed. When the cold deepened, Caleb pulled the key from his pocket. It felt heavier than it should. I might not be here tomorrow, he said. Lena smiled gently. Then I'll see you when I see you. He stood, hesitated, then hugged her. It surprised them both. She held him back without question. That night, Caleb unlocked the small apartment Arthur had prepared. It was plain, clean, quiet, a bed, a table, a window facing the street. He sat on the bed and cried without sound. Arthur spent the night in his own house, walking from room to room. Each space felt wrong, too large, too empty. He realized how much of his life had been built to keep people at a distance. The next morning, Arthur canceled meetings. All of them. He went to the bookstore and bought every romance novel on the shelf. He didn't read them, stacked them neatly, and waited. Caleb arrived late. He looked rested, shocked by sleep. Arthur stood when he saw him. I hope that was okay. Caleb nodded. It was. They walked together along the river. Not as men with power and pride, but as family learning new rules. I don't want your money, Caleb said. I know, Arthur replied. I want your trust. That takes time. I have time. Caleb stopped walking. He looked at Arthur fully then. Do you? Arthur met his gaze. I will. Days passed, slowly, carefully. Arthur showed up without warning and without demands. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't. That mattered more than any promise. Lena noticed the change. Caleb smiled more. He stood straighter, but he was afraid to. Healing scared him. One evening, Arthur watched from across the street as Lena laughed at something Caleb said. The way she looked at him was clear, open. Arthur felt gratitude he didn't deserve. He understood then that love. Arthur Rowan woke with a sense of urgency that morning, a feeling that had been growing for days, a pull stronger than business or pride. He moved through his vast penthouse like a man seeing it for the first time. Everything seemed distant. Polished floors, the expensive art, the quiet hum of machines and staff working around him. None of it mattered. Not really. Not compared to the boy he had lost in his own family. Caleb, the grandson he had thought he knew, but hadn't. He made a decision. Not a gradual one, not one that would be diluted by hesitation or meetings or advisors. He was stepping down from the empire he had built. It had been his life's work, and yet now it felt empty, hollow, without someone to share it with. Assistant protested at first, speaking in the clipped, efficient tones of someone used to orders. "Sir, are you sure?" "The board will not, I'm sure." Arthur interrupted, firm but calm. "This is not about them. This is about us, about him, about family." By midday, the announcement had been made quietly to the board. Rumors spread quickly, as they always do. Investors murmured. Journalists speculated. Friends called with disbelief. Arthur ignored them all. None of it mattered. Every second he had wasted not being there for Caleb felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Meanwhile, Caleb was settling into the small apartment above the bookstore. It was modest, but for the first time in years he had space that was entirely his. He unpacked a small bag of personal items, his few treasured books, and the coat Lena had brought him on a particularly cold night. He placed the key Arthur had given him on the table, turning it over slowly, as if turning it could somehow unlock years of hurt, distance, and misunderstanding. Lena came over that afternoon, as she always did. She brought coffee, of course, and something warm to eat. Caleb had stopped pretending he could do everything alone. He had begun to accept help, cautiously, like a man testing a bridge before crossing it. Lena noticed the subtle change in him, the way he held himself, how his shoulders weren't permanently slumped, how his eyes carried a flicker of hope. "You're different," she said gently, handing him the coffee. Caleb took it with a small smile. "I feel different," he admitted. He didn't explain, but she didn't need him to. She knew. That evening, Arthur returned to the park bench. It's the same one where he had first realized the truth about his grandson. He sat there quietly, watching the city, feeling its pulse, feeling the weight of everything he had missed. Time had a way of moving without permission. But Arthur had decided it would not move him away from his family again. Caleb joined him, eventually carrying a small thermos of tea Lena had made. He sat down without speaking at first. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with the things words could not contain. Regret, relief, exhaustion, longing, and something quieter, trust slowly being rebuilt. Arthur looked at Caleb and spoke softly, almost to himself. "I can't undo the years, but I want to try to be here now." Caleb studied him, searching for sincerity. He found it in the way Arthur's eyes held a tenderness that had been absent in his childhood. He nodded slowly. "I'll let you try," he said. It was the first real step toward reconciliation. Weeks passed. They found a rhythm. Arthur stayed present without intruding, giving Caleb space while offering quiet support. He attended the bookstore without fanfare, sometimes helping with shelves. Sometimes just listening as Caleb shared stories about customers, the neighborhood, and small victories. The grandfather and grandson were no longer separated by distance or silence. They were connected by presence and patience. Lena remained a constant. She visited, laughed, argued gently, and sometimes just sat with Caleb, allowing the silence to be enough. Slowly, the bond between them deepened, growing beyond friendship. Caleb realized he was capable of opening his heart again, that love could arrive softly, without pressure, without rush. He could trust someone else, and that someone was Lena. One evening, Arthur watched Caleb and Lena across the street as they walked home from the bookstore together. They held hands lightly, naturally, as if the world around them had fallen into its proper place. A warmth spread through Arthur's chest, a sense of completion he hadn't anticipated. For the first time, he understood that wealth and power could never replace connection. That love and family were the true treasures of life. Caleb returned to the apartment, quiet and thoughtful. He unlocked the door, leaned against the frame, and looked at the small room filled with his books, his few possessions, and the faint scent of Lena's presence. He felt steady, whole, and finally capable of imagining a future. He poured himself a cup of tea and sat on the bed, sipping slowly, feeling the rhythm of life returning to him. Arthur arrived shortly after, unannounced as he often did now. He didn't speak immediately. He simply stood in the doorway, watching Caleb the young man who had endured so much, who had survived alone and come out stronger. Arthur's heart swelled with pride, tempered by the ache of the years they had lost. "Come sit," Caleb said, gesturing to the small chair beside the bed. "I want to hear something." Arthur complied. He settled down, close enough to reach out if needed, yet giving space to allow Caleb to breathe freely. The two of them sat together, not as a rich grandfather and homeless grandson, not as strangers, not as enemies. They were simply family, learning the art of togetherness after years apart. Days turned into weeks. Caleb continued working at the bookstore, slowly gaining confidence, enjoying the small victories of routine and normalcy. Arthur continued to step away from his empire, dedicating more time to Caleb, to understanding life beyond numbers and deals. Lena stayed nearby, her laughter, warmth, and quiet love reinforcing Caleb's sense of home. One night, as snow began to fall softly over the city, Caleb and Lena returned from a late walk. They found Arthur waiting at the apartment, holding a small stack of new books for Caleb. He smiled, a gentle, unguarded expression that Caleb had not seen before. "These are for you," Arthur said. "Stories you might like, and maybe one day we can read them together." Caleb accepted the books, feeling the weight of years lift just slightly. He smiled at his grandfather, realizing fully that this was the beginning of something lasting, something real. The past could not be erased, but the future was theirs to build, step by careful step. Lena sat beside Caleb, leaning her head lightly against his shoulder. He felt warmth, safety, and a sense of belonging he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He looked at Arthur, who had been watching silently, and finally spoke words he hadn't dared before. "Thank you for staying." Arthur nodded, eyes glistening. "I will always stay, Caleb. That's a promise." Outside, the city hummed with life, but inside that small apartment, the world had narrowed to what truly mattered: love, family, trust, and the slow, careful rebuilding of hearts once broken. Caleb, Arthur, and Lena knew that the journey ahead would have challenges. But they also knew that connection, once restored, was stronger than anything else in life. For the first time in years, Caleb felt that he belonged, not just to a place or a family or a home, but to the people who had waited for him, who had not given up, and who had loved him even when he had been lost. Arthur had stepped down from his empire to step into something infinitely more valuable. And Caleb had finally allowed himself to be seen fully, to be loved fully, and to love in return. And as the night deepened, snow falling gently outside the window, the three of them sat together, quietly, comfortably, with hearts aligned, knowing that the hardest part had passed and that what remained, love, trust, and the slow building of a family, was worth every